Hello and welcome to today's session of PreSales Insight. Today's topic is whiteboarding. So the essentials about whiteboarding and building your playbook. My name is Sascha Oehl. I'm a pre-sales and sales leader across Europe, and I'm helping organizations to get closer to the customer, to understand the white spaces and grow the business in the organizations. Today, I want to walk you through the agenda and show you some of the interesting spots about the whiteboarding experience. So, we will start with what whiteboarding is and how you set up for success. Then we will speak about the tool set, the shapes, the playbooks and the plays that you use. We use one example that gives you an indication how the other examples that are following on are set up. And then we go into the closing of the session again. So how do you start when you want to successfully whiteboard? Probably you have got a lot of items in mind. But the most important thing is set a target. As in every meeting, don't just go in, define in before what's the outcome that you want to drive with exactly that meeting. So, what do you want from this meeting? Regardless, if it's a discovery meeting or a closing meeting, if it's with your boss or with a customer, if you don't set the target, your person target for the meeting, you will not be successful. So when you enter the meeting with the customer, be clear with yourself, what is it you want to reach during these 60 or 90 minutes? When we talk about the whiteboarding itself, you probably have some analogies with a PowerPoint presentation meeting. In a PowerPoint presentation meeting, it is obvious. You have to prepare before, setting up the foils, walking them through, ordering them, adjusting them to the client. Sometimes we hear discussions like, oh, this is a whiteboarding session, I will go on it on the fly. But be clear with yourself. A whiteboarding session needs exactly as much preparation as a PowerPoint presentation. Maybe even more. Maybe you have to practice more different things to drive up your skills. If you're going into a whiteboarding session, make sure you are prepared. What is it that you need? Look at your toolset. It starts with the whiteboard, basically the space that you use for drawing. It could be a physical whiteboard on a wall. It could be a smart board where you work on different locations together. It could be your tablet or your WeLink, your Zoom session, your WebEx session, your whatever you use. This is the vehicle that you need to understand and be capable to operate. Even switching from one application to another requires that you make yourself familiar with it before the customer is in the meeting. So make sure you understand the vehicle and you can work with it. The second obvious thing is the marker itself. Make sure you have a set of markers, maybe different colors. Make sure they are fresh, they can operate. I've seen a lot of whiteboarding sessions which failed simply because there were no markers, or they were all dry out, or there were just one color. Set up for success. Make sure you have your whiteboard markers with you if you're going into a whiteboarding session. Then you can easily operate. You can use the colors that you want, that you've planned and prepared for, and you have the environment under control. If you talk to the customer, it's an easy one. Put the cap on the marker so you're not marking things or yourself, and the marker itself is not drying. Simple things. Also, like the third thing, the eraser. Maybe you've seen it too. Someone is drawing on the whiteboard and tries to erase something, there's no eraser. What they're starting to do is they use their hand or their clothes to remove the color from the whiteboard. Which sounds like a solution or a workaround in the beginning, becomes strange after a while. You look at the hand and it has all colors of the rainbow. Whatever they touch is colored afterwards too. It's just weird. So make sure you've got an eraser. Maybe a physical big one, or some papers, some tissues that you have prepared and have in your pocket just in case there's no eraser. So make sure you are prepared from the physical environment for success. The next one is a topic that we are covering later a bit. It's the play itself. So when you go into session, you need to know what you want to do. So what do you want to put on the whiteboard? How do you structure the whiteboard? What is the order of elements that are appearing here? You are the one responsible for it. So make sure you take care of it. And the fifth one, obviously, is the shapes. While in the beginning a whiteboard consists probably of characters and numbers, after a while you figure out you give it more depth, more optics when you put in some basic shapes. And let's see how a basic shape works. Basic shapes are very simple. They're looking into the world, they're looking into what you need, and they're trying to build it from very simple forms. Circles, squares, triangles, and lines. That's basically all you need. So it's easy to draw even for someone like me who is not good in arts. As an example, you see here how you could draw, for example, a person with a circle and this kind of 3 lines. With a gray color, we draw around the lower and the right side of the object to give it a bit more perspective. The same works, like you see here, for a lens. A lens, for inspection for example, consists of 2 circles and a box. That's a lens. And with some of the gray color on the lower and the right part, it also gets some perspective again. This is the kind of drawing that you need to practice. Here you see another example. We draw a lighthouse. Again, some simple drawings. We can use a lighthouse for different purposes. Maybe as a guidance, maybe as a view in the future, and you can easily work around it and try to draw it. It's something that you can operate and start collecting in your notebook. One form every here and now, one shape every here and now, and it adds up. Look into other presentations. Look what other presenters are using. And add them into your box, into your pocket, one by one. The rocket, as in this example, is also great. A rocket can be a signal for a lot of things, like a big journey, like something great that we are doing, like fast pace. Basically, a rocket consists of very few objects. It looks a bit like in the comic books of the 80s, but everyone could recognize this should be a rocket. If you like, put some fire on it and make sure it can fly. Another thing is what we draw right now. It's like the Enterprise. The Enterprise usually is a big few buildings. They're sitting together like a campus, and this gives a perspective of this is the Enterprise. This is a customer. It sits in the middle, and everything else aligns around of it. These are just a few very simple shapes to draw. While you're making progress, while you're collecting more and more basic shapes, you get your own collection. I put it together some of the most important ones that I use in presentations, like inspection, the lens, like the ruler for measure, or the plan, the money, start and stop, the challenge, the idea. All these are simple basic shapes you could put on your whiteboard. It transports something. If you see the shark in the water, everyone is aware this is not big fun. This is risk. Be careful. These are very simple signs that drives a lot of things in the emotions and the rationale of the person looking you. Try drawing these ones. They are very simple, and enrich your whiteboard with some of the basic shapes. It transports and underlies your message. But be aware, don't draw simply shapes on the whiteboard because you can draw them. A shape needs to have a sense, needs to be something in the context of the message that you are delivering. Otherwise, it's just noise. Make sure it works with the context. The next big thing is a setup. You see 3 main topics here: the stand, the headline, the space. Let's look into it one by one. The first one is be aware of your stand. Of course, drawing on a whiteboard simply requires that you turn to the whiteboard, turn back, that you move to different parts of the whiteboard. But try to not stand in front of the whiteboard if it's not absolutely necessary. So whenever possible, move to the side, so everyone can watch and see the whiteboard. When you stand there, stand firm. Don't dance, don't stand on one feet, stand firm. It supports your message. And when you talk to your audience, stop drawing. Turn around, look to your audience. Like in a PowerPoint presentation, it's not nice if someone talks to you and turns their back to you. Look at your audience when you talk to them. This requires sometimes that you stop drawing, but this is also signaling that you are giving your attention to your customer. The second topic is the headline. You have to know where you want to lead with your whiteboard. You have to know what's the purpose of the whiteboard, where you want to drive. Then you have to be aware what you want to learn from your customer. Think about it before. What are the questions you would ask? What are the things you would like to find out? And also be aware, what are the 3 things your customer needs to understand from you during this session? Be clear with yourself. What do you want from your customer and what you want to give to your customer? If you are not aware of it before the meeting, if you cannot tell me in 5 minutes before the meeting, you will struggle delivering exactly this message. So be prepared. The third thing is prepare for success. So we all have seen a whiteboard as a big white space in the beginning. We have seen presenters starting confidently, working on it, drawing on it. And then as they add up things, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and the characters even shrink to miniatures. What happened? They lost control of the whiteboard. They lost control of the space. They haven't had a clear picture in mind of the final picture. So when you do a whiteboard, plan your space, have an idea how it should look like in the end, so you could plan where you need which space. Control. Have a picture in mind, like 80%, 90%, how it would look like in the end. So you need to know and to understand where you need which portion of white space, and then guide your customer step by step through it. We will see it in a minute. The next one is build your playbook. A playbook is basically a set of plays. A play is one whiteboard. So you have a whiteboard for one purpose. This is a play. And while you see others presenting, while you see suggestions of others, you build your library, your playbook. So you could use the target picture that's the right one for your customer in that moment. Different purpose, different whiteboard. So plan your space accordingly and build your library. Work it through at home. Make sure you're familiar with the steps and then go out and execute. And don't be shy. Sometimes, if it's a new play for yourself, you might have some notes or some graphics in your notebook. Put it in front. Don't worry about it. It's okay. It's nothing bad if the customers see that you have prepared for this meeting, for him, to make sure that this is a success. And then execute. Play the play. Firstly, set up the space on your whiteboard. So usually we see it when we talk about the plays a bit later. When you have your final picture in mind, you know that there are some areas on the whiteboard blocked for different purposes. Make some smaller marks on the board to make sure that you know where is the line that you don't want to cross. You could draw the line or put just a mark on the top and the bottom. But you have then an indication where is which area. Then agree with your customer on what we're doing now. What is the purpose that we're looking for? Verify your assumptions. Put your assumptions on the wall. Ask the customer if it's okay or not. Maybe, and that's best case, they stand up on your whiteboard and is correcting them. Then it's your whiteboard together. Not a one-person whiteboard, a group whiteboard. Perfect. Now you're working together. And then work them step by step through your play. And in the end, get an agreement of the customer that this is a view of both of you. So, we talked about plays. We talked about the playbook. How do we structure the plays? You will see it in this example that we're driving now, but also in the examples that coming later. We've got different examples, different plays for different purposes. Basically, all of the examples in the whiteboarding are around 4 of 6 time zones. So, we have the present. The present is, how does it look today? What is the situation right now? That's the example for present. Maybe you want to find out how we got there. So we are now in a mess, but why we are in the mess? Then we look into the past. Maybe we are good right now and you want to understand why we are good. We're looking into the past. A third variant is looking into the future. So Mr. Customer, I see what you're doing. If we do exactly the same, how would it look like in the future? Based on this thinking of the future, you can change the future, the alternative future. We understood this leads you to A, but if you do this, this and that, it leads you to B. The alternative future is changing the mind of a customer. These are the 4 time zones that we are operating in. The 2 other ones, the gray ones, are the time zones we don't want to touch. It's the alternative present. You could call it fake news, probably. This is something that we don't want to go after. Also the alternative past. If you want to change the past to make it look brighter. This is not correct and it's not helping you for your project. So don't touch the alternative past and alternative present and work with the rest to shape a vision for your customer. So how does it look like? Let's take an example from the present. I mentioned before, the play is, how does it look today? So what we want to do in this play, our idea is, we want to have an overview of the current environment, understand the customer before proposing a change. We want to understand what the customer is doing, how he's set up, before we change his world. That makes sense. Maybe you have seen some people rushing into you and giving you good advice without asking any questions, without knowing you. How serious have you taken these advices? Yeah, you see it. Understand first. And this is the purpose of how does it look today. How does it look today is a very simple play where you bring it the customer environment. This is basically the picture how it should look like in the end. In the end, we are talking about infrastructure in this example, but you could also use it for different ones. We want to have a headline with a mission that the customer wants to achieve. We want to find out points to improve, where we can do better, where we can shape the future. And in the middle section, we want to collect all the items that a customer has. Maybe items that we don't know about yet. If we already know everything, if you have worked this with a customer in the last 2 weeks, don't do it again. It's not a again and again and again workshop. But usually you have some white spots that you want to fill. How do we start? The first thing is we separate and segment the whiteboard. We put ourselves a marker or a line in for the top, for the bottom, and for the management section on the border. The next one would be we draw some other lines to make sure we've got space for all the different items that we've prepared before. Maybe you want to make some real lines for the beginning, for the first two, and here in this just put some marks. It depends upon you. You can even draw the lines. It's up to you. It's nothing bad with both ways. So the first thing that we're collecting is the headline, like the discovery of customer ABC, understanding the environment of customer DEE, or however you would like to call it. Before we talk now about infrastructure, the first and most important thing for this chap is they've got a mission. They need an infrastructure to fulfill the mission. The infrastructure itself is not the mission. So let's put on the top of the table, what are the things that you need to achieve? What is a target that you're striving for? And then start collecting. Let's say in this example, we work in an infrastructure storage company, primary storage or so. Depending on which industry you're working on, your entry point would be slightly different probably because your counterpart is having different responsibility. But let's say for this example, we work in a storage environment. So the first thing, we put down the storage environment, the systems that are necessary, the systems we need to understand, the environment maybe in bigger chunks or finer chunks, and putting it down here. So what's the next question? Next question would be, why do you have this storage? What applications are you driving? What is essential for your company? Maybe SAP, maybe Oracle, understanding the application environment. Maybe you've got a white paper, maybe you've got some plugins for it, some value that you can bring in the future. Maybe you know another customer who's driving exactly the same environment or a similar environment where you can bring them together. But therefore, you need to understand what's the purpose of the storage. Why are they storing things? Where is the stored data coming from? You need to understand this. The next thing in the journey would be like, okay, which operating systems, hypervisors are you using? Let's put it down there. And of course, how do you connect the servers with the storage? Do you have a fiber channel network? Do you have got an IP network? Which bandwidth is it? Which performance? Which speed? Put it down there. You can even mark on the objects like bought 3 years before, or end of maintenance in 6 months, or a concrete date like December 2021. So you can work on this and know where you can drive further business. And in the end, you could easily ask like, gotcha, but how do you protect your environment? There needs to be a protection against ransomware, soft failures, hard failures, whatever. How do you protect it? And then you understand the backup software. Then you understand if they're putting the data on a tape, on a disk-based library, on a virtual tape library, or whatever they're doing. You're collecting all these informations because you could either integrate your stuff into it or even offer your stuff for it. It's up to you. Last but not least, when we buy the infrastructure, we want to understand how the management and operation looks like. Which tools are they using? Are they using like ServiceNow or whatever? Put it down there. So you could easily look again into exactly the integration of it. While you talk through this, you will get messages of the customer like, oh, this was expected to have an uptime all during the month. Or, this is not my favorite object because we see here a downtime every few weeks or whatever. Or it's not having this functionality, there's functionality that we would like to need. Put it directly on the bottom of it. Points to improve. Put it in a positive way. So don't write down things like, it's not working. Write down how it should be. Should have this function. Should have an uptime off. And all this. Put it down. Then you have a complete picture of the customer environment, of the mission, and the main points that needed to be improved. This could be the baseline for your next proposal. Definitely, you may work not in a storage infrastructure company, maybe in another. Look, there are different entry points in the conversation. Take your entry point where you are, and then work up and down the ladder. Make sure you get them all together. Maybe you figure out that some parts are irrelevant for your business, and you decide to not collect it, or you keep collecting it because you don't know about the future. Make sure that you adjust the whiteboard to your needs. This example is like all the other examples that we're working through, just an example. You have to adjust it to your needs. You have to make clear that it works with you. And then it's a success. Try this as a starting point and then adjust. And then at the end of the sessions, it's the call for actions. In this case, it was the things that we need to improve. Other things could be a real call to action. What's happening on Monday? What are we doing next together? Put it on the whiteboard. Write it down. Write it down. And then take a picture of it. Make the summary of the meeting. Put the pictures within. Send it back to the customer. So you have a point you could always refer to. And say, do you remember the meeting that we had on this and this date? Look, this is what we discussed there, and this is how I can help you there. Relate it to each other. This is a basic setup that we are doing for whiteboarding. We've talked about what it is, some of the tool sets, the shapes, the playbooks, one example, and the closing. In the next sessions, in the next videos, you will see one by one different examples and how you could drive them to success. Different plays that you can use in your playbook. Maybe you figure out even better plays. If so, please let me know. If you have a favorite play and you say it's not there yet, maybe it's coming, maybe not, let me know. We can always learn from each other. Let's keep drawing. Let's use the whiteboard. Let's make something for our customers. This makes us all to a success. Thank you for listening the last minutes. Thank you for staying with me. My name is Sascha Oehl, and this was a session, the beginning of the journey into whiteboarding.